Hello, this is Strategy Miscellany, and this is a Children of a Dead Earth extras video about concepts in designing warships for the game. Specifically in this video, using only the stock modules. We'll get into module design in a separate one. So basically, I figured I'd start with this little screen here that I put together with my view on what the different concepts you're working with are, and then we'll get into actually designing some ships. So, first big decision you have to make is whether your ship is going to be ranged versus direct fire. Basically, ranged meaning it's going to fire drones and or missiles, probably from a long distance, without actually getting an intercept with the enemy. And direct fire meaning it's actually going to close with the enemy and open fire with cannons, railguns, coil guns, or lasers. So then that's your question of what's going to be your primary armament. Of course, you can have multiple types of things on the same ship. The question is, what is the first priority? Then the next question is how your orientation on the ship's going to work. There's really two main ways that work well in my experience. You can make a broadsider ship that's meant to turn sideways and hopefully has sloped armor facing the enemy, and then can just basically blast away well sideways. This makes it a little easier to dodge and allows you to fit a whole ring of cannons on and protect your radiators behind the ship. But it also leaves less space to put radiators in than a nose first design, where you can put radiators all around it. And it makes a wider cross section for the enemy to target. And it usually takes a little bit longer to get aligned into position than the main alternative, which is just a ship that has a pointy nose, flies straight at the enemy, and has all its weapons able to fire forwards. And then other would be anything that doesn't fit one of these models. Something that's designed, for example, to constantly roll, to put cannons into the line of fire, more exotic ideas like that. So then once you've got that, the next big thing to consider is how big is your ship going to be? Most of the missions in the game, you're dealing with fitting your fleet under a set tonnage amount, so it's an important question. And related to that is how your delta V budget and your acceleration is going to work out. How much delta V does this ship need to complete its mission? And how fast does it need to be able to accelerate? Aligning with that, you end up with what kind of propellant type you want for it. Is this going to be a chemical rocket with bipropellant? Or is this going to be a nuclear engine, typically with monopropellant? What kind of propellant do you want to use? Do you want hydrogen that gets great specific impulse but takes up a lot of volume? Or do you want something like RP1, basically fancy kerosene, which is kind of the opposite? And then all these things come together to create the cost of your ship, which is the other limiting factor besides size. And so those are kind of the main things to consider. I suppose armor thickness is another one that relates to the size of the ship because that's based on mass and also to the cost. And sometimes a good way to start is to look at a stock ship and see what you don't like about it and then attempt to fix that. So I will pull up Children of Dead Earth and we will do that. All right, so here, for example, is the laser skiff. Now the question is, what's good about this ship and what is not? So what I like about this ship, I mean, it has these laser turret mounts that can basically fire at anything. They can fire forwards, they can fire to the sides. They've got a good turning radius on those turrets, so they can basically hit whatever they need to. And I do like that it's included a big chunk of conventional cannons too, so that it has something for armament besides the basic laser armament. And I like the amount of delta V it gets on the ship, that it can do over 5 kilometers per second of delta V, while maintaining itself as fairly small and fairly cheap. So now the bad about this ship, I would say, is it only has one 13 megawatt laser. So it can only fire one laser at once. I would like the ship to be able to fire, say, 2 or 3 lasers at once. Also, I don't like this front unsloped nose. If I'm aiming the ship straight forwards, shots are going to come in blast right through the nose of the ship and cause a lot of damage. I would like sloped armor in the front, a nice pointy nose. Other than that, the armor situation we could probably do with maybe some kind of anti-laser layer, or possibly a stuffed Whipple shield where we put some silica aerogel in between these. Something like that. And so that's what I'm going to try and design with my own, basically, stock module laser skiff design to fix those issues. So, going back to ship design here, I'm going to just start from scratch. We can also start by working on existing ships, but I'm just going to start from scratch. We're going to keep the concept of the methane gimbaled rocket here. This is going to be a fairly small ship, so I'm not going to use one of these 3 or 7 rocket clusters. Just a single one here, which I'm then going to put 3 of on the back. That's because I want to have redundancy. If one engine gets damaged, I still want the thing to be able to go forwards. Now, next up, we need to add our propellant. It will conveniently add the propellant that is necessary here. Now, I want the whole ship to be under 3 tons, or 3 kilotons, excuse me, and under 40 mega credits, ideally. And I want it to have at least 5 kilometers per second of delta V when we're done with it, to basically maintain the specs of the old laser skiff in a way. So here I'm putting some methane tanks on here. And then the next thing I'm going to put on here, actually, I am going to change this around a little bit. Yeah, we're just going to have 3 methane tanks, and then we're going to duplicate, because I want the ship to be long and skinny for what I'm working with here. So then we're going to stick a crew module on the front, because we want the crew module to be far away from the radiation. And I'm actually going to have... let's see. Yes, that will work. We'll have 2 of these 25 crew modules. Although, let me look here. Let's see. I think I'm actually just going to put 1 45 crew module on here, and we'll see if that's enough to run the whole ship once we get this going. But for now, that's what I'm going to put on here. And then I'm going to add a 5-meter spacer to the front to make sure it has the pointy nose effect that we want. So now the next thing we're going to add is power. And I could add one 60 megawatt reactor, but I would like to have redundancy in my reactors. So I'm going to use these 13 megawatt reactors. And I'm going to send them towards the back of the ship here. And then I'm going to have 4 of them. And you know, on this back side, I'm going to have 4 methane tanks here. Then I'm going to take these reactors and rotate them by 45 degrees so that they fit in kind of these niches in between the little methane tanks there. At least sort of. Alright, so the next thing we need on here is we need our weaponry. So I'm going to have these 13 megawatt lasers. But instead of just having one that can fire at once, I would like to have 3. So I'm going to put them here, rotate them by 60 degrees so that they fit in these niches. And now, we need to add actual laser mounts to these. Just to make this simpler, I'm going to add a layer of armor. We'll stick with cylindrical for this ship, so that now we can actually kind of see what it'll look like with armor on the ship, as opposed to trying to look at it with no armor on it. So, going back here, we can add some laser turret mounts. And we want to have some redundancy in our turret mounts because they get shot off the ship sometimes. So let's say here, they should all be able to fire directly forwards. This is going to be a forward-facing ship design. And I'm going to have, say, 6 of them here. And then, just to be safe, I'm going to add a few extras on the back here, too. So I'm going to move these back to where these reactors are, or so, a little forward of that. Put 3 of them on back there. Ah, there goes the music. So now the good news is we have a little bit of electrical power left to add some other armament to this ship. Okay, so see, these don't have a turret, so they're not that useful. They're not going to hit anything very well. So unfortunately, I think what I'm stuck with is conventional guns. Because all these other ones take 13 megawatts out of the stock modules. And I don't have enough to do that while firing all the lasers, which is what I would like to do. So instead, I'm going to take some of these 60mm turreted cannons, just like the other vessel head. And I'm going to put them back here, kind of with the lasers. But to make sure they don't get in the way of each other, I'm going to offset the cannons by 30 degrees and have a ring of 6 of them right here. Alright, so there's my 60mm cannons. There's my laser mounts. Everything can fire forward simultaneously if I need it to. And we can power everything at once. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding radiators to the thing. So first off, our reactors are going to need a lot of radiators. They need 273 megawatts of excess heat radiated away. So to do that, we're going to need some of these big silicon carbide radiators right on the back of the ship. You can see they're starting to interreflect with each other, so if I just keep adding radiators, they're going to lose efficiency. It's just not going to work to spread them out like a fan there. But if you use, say, 3 or 4, it works pretty well together. And then I'm just going to duplicate this and move the next set forward a bit. So now we have a little bit of redundancy with those. If one of these radiators gets shot off, the reactor should still work at full power. Then the next thing we need to radiate for is our laser modules, which produce a lot less heat, thankfully. So they don't need quite such big radiators. So I'm going to get these slightly smaller radiators and line them up here. Oh, and the other thing I should do is these turret mounts are right in the way of the radiators. I'm going to rotate them by 60 degrees so that they're not in the way of the radiators anymore, and the radiators aren't in the way of them. Now I can slide back these radiators a little bit. That's what was interreflecting with them, or interacting with them. And then we just need radiators for the crew module, which this shouldn't need much at all. 16.5 kilowatts. I can use these aluminum ones because the temperature the crew module is radiating at is pretty low. And the nice thing is I can pump the heat back here and have these radiators back with the others. And they're small enough, I'm actually going to put a ring of 6 around the ship. Even though there's some interreflection, this adds redundancy because I don't want the crew module to overheat in the middle of our battle. Now, it looks like we're not actually going to have enough crew to manage all of this, so I'm going to have to change up how this works a little bit. I'm going to replace this with the 30 crew module, and then I'm going to duplicate the 30 crew module. Now the question is, do I want a cylinder or do I want more of sort of a long, sharp front? I think I want more of the long, sharp front. And the next thing we have to do is deal with the radiation here. Easiest way to do that is just add a radiation shield. And as you can see, that has solved the problem. Now I'm going to change this 5mm spacer to a 5-meter spacer to a 10-meter spacer, because I want to have a nice sharp nose for this ship. And I'm going to move these laser mounts a bit forwards. There we go. And now the next thing we have to do is make sure this ship has good armor on it. So, outer layer. Aluminum's a fine outer layer. You can use other metals, though. But aluminum is nice and light. And you really need only what's called a Whipple shield. Now, this is basically high-velocity projectiles come in. They hit the Whipple shield. They turn into basically a cloud of plasma. You put a bit of space between the Whipple shield and the next layer. And the plasma basically dissipates before it can destroy anything. I've never been quite clear how much space you need for a Whipple shield. I'm going to use 1/3 of a meter here, 33 centimeters. And then I'm going to add another layer. And this layer is going to be my defense against heavy impacts. This is going to be my heavy armor layer. There's a lot of different factors you have to consider here. How expensive your armor is, how heavy your armor is, its yield strength, its tensile strength. I've never been 100% sure on what's best to use here, to be honest. But there's a lot of good things you can use. So, for example, on this one, let's see, what's a good thing here? I'm going to use some of this titanium aluminum tin alloy. Actually, I'm going to use this Alpha 2 titanium aluminide. The good news is it's a bit lighter. So we'll go ahead and put, let's say 2.5 centimeters of it on here. And then the next thing we need is an anti-laser and anti-spalling layer. Basically, what this is for is to prevent particles from the Alpha 2 aluminide layer when the outside gets hit, the hot chunks of metal flying inside the ship when the inside of the armor layer kind of bulges out. We don't want those little chunks of metal to get everywhere and cause damage. So we're going to add a little bit of an anti-spalling layer of kind of a soft metal. Something like, say, copper. Not very much of it. Maybe even just half a centimeter. And I'm going to put a little bit of space in between these two. I'm not sure if that's necessary, but it seems like a good idea. Then the last thing I'm going to do is right on the inside, I'm going to have a bit of an anti-laser layer. If a laser shot melts through all the other layers, this will stop it for a while anyway. And a good thing for that is actually just nitrile rubber. So right on the inside here, we'll have, say, a centimeter of nitrile rubber. So how does the ship look relative to the conditions I set up for it? So it has 4.5 kilometers of delta V, not quite as much as I wanted. Acceleration is good. It can fire 3 laser mounts at once, while the old ship could only fire 1. It has slightly less conventional cannons, but basically the same armament there. It's well designed to fly straight forwards. And it weighs considerably more and costs considerably more. What with the extra radiators that are necessary and the fact that it has a bit more armor than the old ship. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the armor load on this a little bit here. In a couple different ways. Number one, I'm going to make the nose a little less pointy, although it still has the 10-meter spacer at the end to make sure it's fairly pointy on the very front. And then number two, I'm going to reduce a bit of this armor a little bit. Reduce this to 2 centimeters. And reduce the nitrile rubber to, say, 7 millimeters. Now we're at a delta V of almost 5 kilometers per second. The ship is a bit lighter, it's only 3.84 kilotons, and it costs 34 million credits. And then what I'm going to do also is just entirely for decorative purposes, I'm going to put a very thin kind of cap of gold on the ship. So let's see. Yeah, I'm going to make it just 500 micrometers thick because I don't want to add too much weight at all. And I'm going to have it start at 80% of the way up. And gold. So now the ship has basically a gold-plated front. It adds a tiny bit of weight, and a tiny bit of cost. But, you know, you can't put a price on style. And I'm going to move these turrets up so that they're right on the line there where the gold starts, because I think that looks a little better. Alright, so now this just needs a name. I'm going to call it the medium laser ship -S. The S is going to stand for this is entirely built out of stock modules and not anything that I have designed myself. So there's the medium laser ship S. If I want, I can compare it to a laser skiff. So it is over twice the mass, and it doesn't have the decoy blast launcher. But it can fire 3 lasers at once, as opposed to the 1 laser at once of this ship. It has slightly better acceleration, slightly worse delta V. And I would argue it has a better armor scheme than the original ship by a considerable amount. So to demonstrate that, let me just try something real quick. What I'm going to do is go to the sandbox. I'm going to give myself one of my design. Where did I put that? Medium laser ship S. I'm going to give the enemy 3 regular laser skiffs. And I'm going to see how we do against them. Now, admittedly, I mean, each of these ships is designed to be part of a combined fleet, so this isn't an entirely fair test. But let's see what happens. They might be able to destroy me with sheer weight of cannon fire, to be honest. But we'll give it a try. I'll see if they just come for me. Good. We'll just let them come for me. Yeah, this should be fine. Alright. And now we're going to nose forwards. And we're going to target their cannons, their laser mounts, their radiators. And we're just going to open fire with everything right off the bat. So you see, the good news is I can fire 3 laser mounts at once. Well, each of them can fire 1 laser mount at once. So we're each firing the same weight of laser fire at the same time. The other good news is not all of their cannons can fire at once because of the way their ships are designed. However, by sheer weight of cannon fire, they might actually beat me here. We shall see. Okay, so in that case, it went quite well. We destroyed all their ships. Now, we are still getting a lot of fire on us. But you can see the sloped armor's helping a bit. So, we lost 5 of our laser turrets. Basically, most of our laser turrets off the front of the ship were destroyed. And I do see one design flaw I need to fix here. So you see these laser turret mounts are getting blocked by these radiators. So let me fix that real quick on my design. And what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm just going to take the aluminum radiators for the crew module, or the crew modules, and I'm going to rotate them by 30 degrees. Alright, so now these laser turrets can fire in between these radiators if they have to. Especially if the front one gets shot off. All right, so that's our first new design for the day. Let me show another one as an example here. So let's look at another ship here that they've designed, that the base game has designed. Say, here's the Corvette. So, what's good about the Corvette? What don't I like about the Corvette? Good delta V, decent acceleration. Has these sniper coil guns, which are a great little weapon. They fire at great ranges. It has a bunch of auto-fire railguns. Again, a great weapon. I'm trying to see how there are 7 on here. So there's 3. And there's 3 and then 4. That's how they did it. I kind of like the concave armor scheme just for the aesthetics of it. The armor scheme is okay. Could be better, probably. Now, what don't I like about it? Well, for one thing, it actually lacks the ability to fire all these weapons at once. So each of these sniper coil guns and auto-fire railguns needs 13 megawatts. It only has one 13.5 megawatt reactor. So it can basically fire one weapon at once, maybe 2 depending on how the rate of fire is on these weapons. Yeah, let me see if I can view the... No, I mean, those take the whole time, basically. Yeah, the capacitor is charging the whole time this thing is firing. So it's going to need that energy the whole time. Now, the auto-fire railgun, I think there's something to do with the way that frame rates work, that this can maybe get away with being charged on a little less power. But still, this ship is spectacularly underpowered for what it needs to do. So I would say it's overgunned and underpowered. I like the weapons they've chosen. The sniper coil guns and auto-fire railguns are excellent. The blast launcher is probably a smart idea. And the basic concept of the ship is pretty good. So, how can we do better? So the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this ship a broadsider. Now there is a base game broadsider. I should show that real quick. It's called the Sentinel. It has its problems, but you can see it's only got this heavy armor on one side, and then it's got these railguns here that can all fire straight out that one side. So the idea is the ship turns sideways and just kind of blasts its way forwards. There's the engine, so it does have to kind of gimbal itself into place. But you can see how the radiator's defended here. I wouldn't go quite to this extreme of taking the armor off the other side, but the basic concept of the Sentinel is pretty good for that. So let's try and combine that with the Corvette to make a broadside firing ship here. So I'm going to go ahead and use methane again. It's useful to have everything using the same propellant. That's another advantage of the nuclear rockets. A disadvantage that they produce radiation you have to deal with. But an advantage is they only use one propellant at once, whereas any good chemical rocket is going to be bipropellant. So there we go. Let's get some big methane tanks on here. Let's say... What if we did that? That might be a bit large. I'm going to try and build this on 3. I'm going to try and build this a little smaller than the baseline Corvette. It'll probably have a little bit less weapons too, but it'll be a little smaller. Now for power plant, I'm going to use 3 of these 13 megawatt reactors. put them on the back here. Although, now that I think about that, actually, yes, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have them on the back side where they're protected by the mass of the ship from enemy fire. So I'm going to duplicate the module, put it here, duplicate the module, put it here. Have a line of reactors along the back of the ship. Now we just need to add a crew module. Or two. Good to have redundancy by having two crew modules so that even if one is destroyed, the ship can still operate with kind of a half complement of crew situation. And then let's put a spacer on the front just to give it a somewhat pointy nose. Even though this won't be going in nose first, I think it's still a little bit helpful sometimes. So now the next step I'm going to do on here, just to make sure this looks right, is set up the thick armor layer that's only going to be on one side. So what I'm going to do is make the armor hexagonal, and I'm going to mess with the aspect ratio to kind of flatten out the ship a little bit. Alright, maybe not quite that much. That looks a little extreme. Maybe something more like that. So then you see this will be kind of the facing side of the broadside. Or actually, I'll make this the facing side of the broadside here. The other side will be the weaker armored side. So what I'm going to do is take some really good armor here. Some of this vanadium chromium steel. Real strong stuff. And I'm going to make a 2 centimeter layer of it. But now I'm only going to use it on part of the ship. I'm going to set the radial to 50%. And then I'm going to set the rotation to 50%. Oh, okay, oops, not 50%. I'm going to set it to 25%. Except for I want it on the other side, so I'm going to set it to 75%. Okay, now I just need to get the reactors on the other side of that. So let me look at that real quick. So right now they're up there, kind of. I think if I set them to 120, they'll do what I want them to. I guess I should have said 150. No, I should have said 180. Oops. Alright, 180. $180. And 180. Alright, so now the reactors are all along the back side of the ship. I do want them a little further away from the crew module, so I'm going to move these back a little bit. And actually, I'm going to do this a slightly different way. So there's these two reactors in the back here. This one I'm going to get rid of. This one here I'm going to realign to 210. And then I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to realign its copy to 150. Okay, so now the reactors are all farther away from the crew module, but also all on the back side, where they'll hopefully be safer from enemy fire. So now the next step I'm going to do is add the main armament to this ship. So these 11mm auto-fire railguns, they don't say they're turreted, but they are. They are an excellent weapon. And I'm going to basically put them on the front side of the ship here where they can broadside effectively. I'm going to put them right down the spine of the broadside here. Now I have reactors that can basically fire 3 of these weapons at once. I'm going to put 3 of them on here. I'm not sure why that one is showing kind of stuck in the armor. Trying to figure out what I can do about that. I don't think it'll actually affect it in battle, but it just doesn't look very good. Alright, that's a little better. Not ideal, but let's try nudging them all forwards, maybe. Alright, that looks pretty good. And then the next thing we need on here is those sniper coil guns. I like those too. And now these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set one back here. That looks good. And then I'm going to have 2 kind of on the sides of the broadsider, I think, is what I'm thinking here. So, like, let's take this one and duplicate it and then rotate it by 30 degrees. Have it right there. And then duplicate that. Oops. Duplicate that and put it at 330 degrees. Okay, so now we have 3 sniper coil guns, 3 auto-fire railguns. And I want to put a few conventional cannons on here just for good measure. I'm just going to put those, say right here. I'm going to rotate by 30, and I'm going to put one on each face of the ship, basically. So that we have a little bit of firepower in the back in case something happens. And in fact, I'm going to do one more thing like that, kind of for anti-missile defense too. I'm going to add one of these 1 megawatt laser modules. And I'm going to put it on the side here. Near all the reactors, kind of. Have the laser module out by the reactors. And I'm going to add a set of laser mounts for it. I'm just going to have 3, I think. And rotate them by 60 degrees. There, now we have some laser defense coverage on the ship too. Now the next thing we need to do is properly put full armor coverage on the ship. because we don't want to have the other side completely defenseless. Generally, that's a bad idea. So let's add an outer Whipple layer first. I'm going to do... You know, aluminum is really a fine outer Whipple layer. I'll do that. It's a little boring, but that's okay. Put in a little bit of spacing. And then I'm going to add kind of an anti-laser / anti-spalling layer to the whole thing of this aramid fiber here. It's expensive, but, you know, this ship is kind of worth it, I think. This is an expensive ship. And I'm going to use a pretty thin layer of this aramid fiber. And then I'm also going to add, for an armor layer, as kind of an anti-laser and final layer, I'm going to add some of this plastic here, this UHMWPE. I have a centimeter of that. Now the last thing we need to add to this ship is radiators for the heat. So first off, the reactors are going to need radiators. And this is the one disadvantage of this kind of ship, is you have to kind of stick all the radiators on the back, unless you want them to be in harm's way, which you don't. So I'm going to give this radiator a rotation of 180. And I'm going to move it back a little bit. And I'm going to start duplicating them. Getting in the way of my laser turret mount. Let me try something. Yeah, let's try having... That gets right in the way of that, though. That's obnoxious. Okay, this might actually work pretty well. Have some extra laser turret mounts there. I think I'm going to have to upgrade the size of my crew modules, though. And given how those look, I think I want to have them placed vertically rather than horizontally. That will give me a little more radiator space too, which is good. Alright, so these two radiators are removing most of the heat, but we need a third one. Alright, and the next thing we need to cool is our laser module. That's not very big. It shouldn't be much of a problem. Yeah, not at all. We can just use a little tiny radiator for that. All right, and then last is the radiation, or not radiation, the radiators for the crew modules. Now, it looks like, actually, I could go back to the 30 crew module size. Let me try that. And what if I put them side by side again, instead of having two? Okay, yep, that works. And the last thing I need to do is worry about radiation shielding for the crew. And that works also. So let me go over this ship and see what it looks like right now. 4.27 kilometers per second of delta V. Good acceleration. It's got more weapons that can fire simultaneously than the old version. Weighs a little bit less than the old version. I think it costs about the same. We'll have to do the comparison when we get there. I would like it to have slightly more delta V capacity. 4.27 is okay, but could be better. I'm going to slightly reduce the thickness of the vanadium chromium steel. And to counterbalance that, I'm going to slightly increase the thickness of the aramid fiber. Just kind of fiddling with things to see if I can get the delta V a little better without compromising the effectiveness of the ship. Yeah, there we go. We've got 4.5 kilometers per second of delta V. That's pretty good. So I'm going to call this one the Railgun Frigate S. And I'm going to accept. Let me compare that to the Corvette. So obviously they look a bit different. Acceleration is about the same. They have slightly better delta V. In terms of armament, we look about the same, but we know in reality we can actually power all of these. Armor schemes are very different. I think mine is better, but it's hard to say. Mass, mine is smaller. Mine is also cheaper. Let me pit my ship against a Corvette and see how it does. So I'm going to take the Railgun Frigate S. I'm going to hit it against one Corvette. I'm even going to be sporting and give them a gun skiff. And let's see if they come for me. There they go. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to orient broadside, going to start targeting their systems. And I'm almost in range with the sniper coil gun, so I'm going to let it open fire. I'm going to hold off on the other stuff. Now, the question is, why is my ship not orienting broadside? I mean, it's doing okay, but I would like it to orient broadside more thoroughly than just this. Good news is I can manually choose my ship's orientation also. Let's see, what if I tell my ship manually to orient over there? There we go. Oh, they took some kind of big hit against me there, blew something up. Hopefully my ship will stabilize before too long. There we go, now we're getting some fire back at them. Hopefully we'll be oriented back into the position I want before too long here. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and open fire with the cannons too. Let me see how they look. Okay, they're definitely losing their weapons on these ships. Okay, we took out the gun skiff with a lucky shot or something. Now it's just the corvette. The problem with attacking their corvette, the effectiveness of it, is in part because it's got so much redundancy to it, because they can only fire one or two of its guns at once, but it has a whole bunch of guns. But the good news is, I think we're going to win this one. They just don't have that much left. Although we don't have that much left either. Okay, so to be honest, I think you'd have to call this one a draw. They seem to have destroyed a bunch of our fuel tanks so that we're basically out of Delta V. We took out all of their weapons. I think for this one, you have to kind of call it a draw. So, based on that, I'm going to edit my ship a little bit here. All of my auto-fire railguns got shot off pretty quickly, so I'd like to have a couple more on there. Gonna kind of stick them on the back here. And then I think I'd like to have a fourth methane tank in here to increase Delta V. And also just to increase redundancy when the tanks get shot off. And then I'm going to go ahead and have 3 engines, and I'm going to slightly increase the armor level. Given that I have the extra Delta V to pay for it now. So I may still need to manually orient the ship into the correct orientation. Just seeing what this does to the ship too if I up the level of the aramid fiber. Alright, I think I'm alright with that. Alright, so this is the Railgun Frigate S. And then lastly, I would like to design a carrier type ship. So let me look at what one of their carriers looks like. So here's an escort carrier. And let me look at it in a little bit more detail here. But first off, though, I like its amount of Delta V. I like its acceleration. I like that it's got some railguns on it so that it actually has some home defense aside from just the drone launchers. And I like that it has 2 drone launchers so it can get them out pretty quickly. But it only has 25 Stinger drones on the ship. I think it could use more than that. It's underpowered for what it's trying to do a little bit. And it runs on, it looks like, for some reason it has, oh, this must be for the drones, I guess, the fluorine and the methane, so that it can actually refuel its drones. I don't honestly think that's all that helpful. So I'm probably going to take those off my design. And I also don't like this very flat nose that it has. That's never a good idea. So let's take a look here at designing a better carrier. Also, I think I'd like mine to be a little smaller if possible. Alright, got that methane. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate and then just have the second module just have one of them. This is what I'll build my launchers around here for the drones. We'll go ahead and use these Stinger drones. They're pretty good, really. Now, the thing is, I would like to have 3 of these, ideally. So that I can fire more at once. Alright, and the other thing is we need ammunition for these. I would like to have 50 Stinger drones on this ship. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these drone launchers, I'm going to wrap them around their ammunition, and I'm going to get rid of this extra methane tank here. There we go. And then in front of the drone launchers, I'll go ahead and put a crew module on here, or 2. And a little spacer on the front to give it a pointy nose. And then we're going to need power for this thing. If I want to power 3 Stinger drone launchers at once, that's going to be 19 megawatts. So I'll go ahead and use 2 of these 13 megawatt reactors. And put them on the back, where they're far away from the crew. And then it would be nice to have some weapons on the ship to defend itself. I'll go ahead and give it a few conventional guns here. Just 3 of them, say. And then I'm just looking for something with a good range. It doesn't take up too much capacity here. Well, you know, why not these turreted capacitor coil guns here? Wow, those are a bit large. Didn't realize quite how large those were. Clear those off. Let's use these auto-fire railguns. Can't go wrong with those. Classic. Let's see. Move these to the back here. And let's put 3 of them on. Rotate it into the sides like that. Now the next thing this ship needs is armor. I'm going to go ahead and be a little fancy with the Whipple shield on this one, just for color and such. It's not going to be under direct fire as much as the others, ideally anyway. So I'm going to give it a nice copper Whipple shield. It just looks better, I think. And I'm going to go ahead and put some space in, but I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. I'm going to give 10 centimeters of space, and then I'm going to make kind of a stuffed Whipple shield with silica aerogel. So I'm going to take this silica aerogel here, and I'm going to put 10 centimeters of it in there. It's very light, so that doesn't add too much weight to it. Okay, and then we need an actual heavy layer. Or not exactly heavy layer, it doesn't have to be heavy, but it has to be strong. I'm going to use this amorphous zirconium steel. Just 1.5 centimeters of amorphous zirconium steel. And then on the inside of that, an anti-laser layer of some of the polyethylene. The UHMWPE. Honestly, in terms of figuring out what's good for what, I kind of had to read the forums a little bit to see what's good against lasers. They basically said rubber, plastics, silica aerogel. Basically stuff that's not great at conducting heat, it sounds like, really. Alright, so now the last step is to add the radiators here. so first off, our reactors need radiators. These are typically going to be the largest ones on the ship, although if you get good at module design, you can design a real high temp reactor that makes the radiators more efficient. They can be smaller. But for now, these to the back. What if I had 4 of them? Yeah, I mean, I lose a little efficiency, but it does give me a little bit of redundancy too. And then the crew modules. I'll just need some little ones here. I'll go ahead and keep up the 4-fold symmetry. And then lastly is for the drone launchers, need some radiators. Not much. They don't apparently produce that much excess heat. Alright, I'm going to put them back with the other radiators. And the last step we need is we just barely need a radiation shield. I think I can actually fix that a different way. I guess not. I thought I could just put a little space in between them, maybe. Doesn't look like it. So instead, we'll go ahead and put a radiation shield on there. Alright, let me look at my finalized design here. Could use a little bit more delta V. Other than that, I like it. So let's say I'm going to replace this amorphous zirconium steel with something lighter, this Alpha 2 titanium aluminide. Means I can afford to put a little bit extra on there. And what if we added a little bit more tanks to this here? Okay, one more tank brings it up to 4.32. That's more in the range I would like. Now, the only thing is, just looking if I want to put decoys on this. I don't usually truck with decoys very much. Especially since they'd have to be the large ones here to have any effect. They'd have to be these 300 megawatt decoys. But sure, we'll bolt one of these on the side somewhere. And then we'll add another methane tank to counterbalance mass from that. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to call this the drone carrier S. Now, let me compare the drone carrier S to the ship I was trying to replicate, the escort carrier. About the same delta V. They have marginally better acceleration. Weaponry, I'd say we're about the same. We can launch our drones a little faster. Armor, I mean, it's a different scheme, but I think mine's pretty good. I'm slightly heavier, but also slightly cheaper. And the key difference that you can't see here is I have twice as many drones as they do. That's the real big difference. So, you wouldn't really use one of these alone, probably. But let's go ahead and have them with an escort carrier. I'll even give them a beamcraft to help in their defense. And I'm going to give myself a drone carrier S. And then what I'm going to do is get ready to launch a strike on them. So I've got 50 here. And I'm going to launch 30 of them. They're launching 20 at me. So let's send my 30 out here to go get them. There we go, that looks good. Ah, they've evaded me. Ah, let's recalculate here. There we go. Alright, set our targets. Not sure why we're not opening fire. Maybe once we turn around we will. Well, that was a bit strange. Oh, well, we'll send another strike at them right at the last second here. Now, first off, as they're coming in, I'm going to send 5 to counter them. I'm going to get everybody ready to try and target their guns before they can destroy us. Oof. It does not look good. Okay, so in that case, something went wrong with my drone strike, and they absolutely obliterated me before I could do anything about it. I'm going to try that again. See what happens here. And I'm actually going to launch counter drones at their drones this time, and then launch a drone strike at them directly. So here's my 20 drones to counter their drones. Go. See if we can't take some of them out at the pass here. Or we might just fly by each other, no effect. Alright, let's see if I can get that same drone fleet to hit the capital fleet. They will. Excellent. Alright, see if we can't do some good damage here. Well, we took out their beamcraft, that's something. And we damaged their escort carrier. Their radiation shields were taken out. I mean, that's going to be a problem for them in the long run. Unfortunately, I don't think the long run really matters much in this case. So now let's launch the rest of our Stinger drones. And try and do basically the same thing again. Sorry about that. Game froze up on me a little bit there. Happens sometimes. Alright, well, let's just send this one out to target their escort carrier here. And we'll see how we can do against their drones today. Normally, of course, I wouldn't have the drone carrier operating independently. It would have other ships with it that would be better at defending against enemy drones. So this isn't entirely a fair test. But as you can see, we were destroyed. Now let's see if our drones can destroy them. Oh, I forgot. If your drones don't have an escort carrier... Oh, never mind. Here we go. I was thinking they weren't going to work, but looks like they're fine. There we go. See if they can get some fire going. Come on, guys. Not quite sure what's preventing them from getting off good shots here. Something about the angle of approach, I guess. Yeah, I'm just not sure why they're not being able to align themselves in a useful way. But the real lesson there is just that I'm not very good with drones, honestly. And prefer to use just the capital ships. So anyway, those are some basic designs. And kind of my design philosophy a little bit. Thank you very much for watching. The next episode will go back to the campaign.